Next question. Do you think martial arts tournaments are the most effective way for preparing for physical confrontation? I just competed in my second jiu-jitsu tournament as a 3-straight white belt. In one match, I completely lost focus and control of my mind because I believe I was taken aback by the strength and wildness of my opponent. Hey man, I dig it 100%. I can barely even remember how the match unfolded. I've given this match significant thought, and I concluded that I need to compete more. I'm very comfortable with everyone in my academy. I trust the guys I roll with without question. They're like family now. The guy in the tournament was a total stranger. He was unknown and therefore elicited fear. I allowed myself to be crippled by fear. Is there any other way to overcome this beyond competing in tournaments? Thank you.
All right. Competing is definitely part of it. And it's interesting that he's asking if this is the most effective way to prepare for a physical confrontation. It is a very good way to help you prepare for a physical confrontation. And the bottom line is competing. One of the things that's true with competing, and it's true with anything, is that the more familiar you are with the unfamiliar, the more familiar it will become. Yeah. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but the more familiar you are with the unfamiliar, the more familiar it will become. So you get to become familiar with things that are unfamiliar, and you learn how to handle things that you aren't expecting. In the teams, we always talked about your first free fall jump when you're learning how to skydive with a free fall rig, and your first jump seems like it's like 3 seconds long, even though it's a minute. Even though it's a minute, because you're all amped up and all you see is your altimeter, and the more you jump, the more you see until that minute. I mean, have you ever tried to hold your breath for a minute?
Yes.
That's like a long time, right? But that's the amount of time that can take up a free fall. It can be a nice long minute where you're observing all these different things. But when you first start doing it, it doesn't seem very long. I'm sure if we had Andy Stumpf on here, his 1 minute free fall probably seems like a really, really long time because he's got thousands of jumps. And so this is the same thing. The more you train for chaos, the more accustomed you're going to become to the chaos. Now, what's great is, in this particular case, he's talking about this guy's just wild and crazy. And hey, if you survive it that first time, well, the next time someone goes wild and crazy, you're like, okay, well, here's what I need to do. I need to put this in check. I need to hold on. I need to make sure I don't give any positions, but I'm not going to get crazy. I'm just going to absorb some. You go through that mental drill, and the more you go through that mental drill, the better you will get at it. And this is true. This is true with anything. And that's why, when I was running the SEAL training, we would make it so we'd hit people with the most random possible things, because that's what prepares you for random possible things, is random possible things. That's what you want to deal with. It's kind of weird, in jiu-jitsu, Dean used to talk about this, and now you can hear John Danaher talking about it as well. And if you have never been in a certain situation before, you're not ready for it. Yeah. And so there's a position in jiu-jitsu called 50-50, right? That's what it's called now. We used to call it Kakareko because that's the position that Dean was in when he beat a guy named Kakareko for the ADCC World Championships. And Dean calls that position 90-10 because he's been in it so much that even though it's a neutral position, meaning we both have the same advantages and disadvantages, when Dean's in that position, he's been in it so much that he's got a 90% chance. He's got a 90% chance of success because he's been there 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more than you. And I heard John Danaher talking about the same thing the other day. He's getting, his jiu-jitsu fighters right now are doing things to guys that they're putting people in positions that the person's not used to. Yeah. So if you're not used to it, guess what? You're at an advantage. Even though let's say I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt and I've been training for 20 years, if I've never been in this particular position before, I might as well be a white belt in that position. Yeah. And you can see that happening. You can see that happening in jiu-jitsu. That's why when somebody comes up with a new type of moves, that move can be effective for a little while. Like let's say you came up with a new move. You might catch me in that new move one time.
Yeah.
And then I go, oh, well, I know what he did. But now if instead of just a new move, you had a whole new area.
Yeah.
That I had to learn. Then I had to learn a whole new deal around. Yeah. It's the same thing with Eddie Bravo and 10th Planet. You know, like they were doing things like, oh, I've never been in this position before. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
And they were catching guys like that. And then the more people figure out that part of that system, okay, well, then you get better at it and we get to a neutral ground again. Yeah. But anytime you can, so in training, anytime you can get to put yourself in a situation that you haven't been before, it's going to be beneficial to you. Yeah. Now, how does this translate to real physical confrontations, right? How do you train for that? Well, how often are you putting on gloves in jiu-jitsu? How often are you having somebody punch you in the face? How often are you having somebody come up and push you around? How often are you having people do things that people are going to do in a street fight, right? That people are going to do in a street fight that they wouldn't normally do in a jiu-jitsu match, right? For instance, in a street fight, does anyone ever start on the knees? Right? They don't start on the knees. No,
sir, they do not.
You don't start on the knees in a street fight. You don't say, "Hey, you want to fight me?" And then you get down on your knees, and so does the other guy. And now we figure out what happens. No, street fights don't start on the knees.
No.
So you're almost and people ask me this. Actually, somebody asked me the other day, what should I do when starting from the knees? What's a good takedown? I'm like, pull guard. Because why are you on your knees? Yeah. The best thing to do if your opponent is on their knees, stand up and kick them in the face. Right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to be, why would you be on your knees?
Yeah.
So don't practice that. So how do you prepare for, the best way to prepare for these combat situations is jiu-jitsu tournament a good way? Yes, it is a good way. Is boxing boxing a good way? Is it good to do a smokers? So you figure out what it's like when you want to talk about someone going wild. Wait till you get someone that's untrained in boxing come throwing windmill haymakers at you 38 in a row. Yeah. Now they're going to be exhausted after that first 32 seconds. Yeah. But you would have had to have withstand and not get punched in the head.
Yeah.
Because if you get punched in the head by a wild haymaker, I don't care who you are, if they connect with your chin, there's a possibility you might go down.
Yes.
So you need to be careful of that. Yeah. So don't just think, oh, just jiu-jitsu. Hey, go out, train some boxing, train some Muay Thai, and go and spar. And if you can, do a smokers, because smokers pretty easy to do. In other words, you don't need to do like a full preparation camp and all that. It's an unofficial event. So you go do a smokers and you're going to experience somebody going wild on you.
Yeah.
Throwing haymakers at you, throwing crazy kicks at you. Do that. Do all these things to get ready for those physical confrontations. And then you also, on top of that, you read and you look at YouTube videos. Go watch YouTube videos. I've talked about this before. Go watch YouTube videos of street fights because you get to see what kind of things people do, which can be very effective, right? You need to learn to watch out for sucker punches. You need to learn to watch your back and watch who's sneaking up on you and be aware of your surroundings and put your back against the wall. There's all these little things that you can do to make sure that you're not going to get sucker punched. But you got to pay attention to those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That wildness that he talks about.
Yeah.
That is a huge thing. It's like a whole nother factor where, especially, and exactly how he said, he's real familiar with his training partners,
right.
So man, the amount of cruising and kind of relaxing, even during the roll, there's probably a significant amount of it, almost to the point where it seems like anyway, where he kind of maybe expects that. Or, even subconsciously kind of he understands that that's kind of part of the deal. You go against a complete stranger and he gets wild. Then it's like, whoa, this is like, it's kind of overwhelming,
Yeah, and also, even at the 3-stripe white belt level, this other guy, he's got his little game. He's got his game that he plays. And there's a chance that as a 3-stripe white belt, you haven't learned that part of the game. So it just feels crazy.
Yeah. And that whole, when you compete for the first, second time, just at those earlier.
See, that's the thing is, the more you train, the less holes there are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The less holes there are in your game. And so if you're a 3-stripe white belt, you might not have good guard replacement.
Yeah.
Right? Like you really haven't learned how to replace the guard from cross-side. Yeah. Well, if this guy happens to be a guy that holds really well across the side and that's where he works his game from, man, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
You're in big trouble.
Yeah. And it all seems so unpredictable, too, at those earlier stages because you don't know where your holes are. I mean, you might know some, but you don't know.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't seen enough of the game and you haven't been in enough situations where you can kind of stay calm and, you know, all this stuff. So to your point where you say you got to be familiar with the unfamiliar kind of thing.
Remember when Majid started just baseball bat choking everyone?
Yeah.
That was
weird.
Legit. Yeah, these little weird setups, and he would let people pass his guard, but they'd be thinking, "Oh, I'm about to score some points on that," and boom, they're getting tapped out.
Yeah, bro. It was so foreign that so he went. The two real famous ones at the time when he exploded on the scene with these was it was Clark and Zach Max. So there was two matches, and one of them, Zach Maxwell mounted him armbar. No, has him in the armbar. Meanwhile, baseball choke is in. But who cares? Because really, that rule, not rule, but that situation kind of applies. If you have someone in the armbar, I don't care. You choke me up. I got the armbar.
I'm about to break your arm.
Right? He's going for the arm, but he can't lean back because the baseball bat chokes in, and he's like, he got a tap.
Yeah,
he got a straight up tap, and then I think he was Clark where he could have been the other way around, but either way. Clark has a
Zach was the unblock. We were at these matches, weren't we? I know I was.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
I was there live.
I saw the videos, but the kind where Clark was like, I know this choke. I'm in mount or I'm in this good position. I know that this choke doesn't work. It simply doesn't work because I have the advantage, and he gets choked unconscious because he doesn't tap. Sure, it might hurt, and that is the case for a lot of chokes where it's like, sure, this hurts.
No,
but
don't
it's
even
not
hurt.
A choke.
No, a good one doesn't even hurt.
Yeah, it's
a
just
good
in.
choke is just in.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about there is a guy named Majid. What's Majid's last name?
Page.
Yeah, that's right. And he came onto the scene, we'll say, with this is what's interesting about this is the baseball bat choke is not a new choke.
Yeah.
It's not a domain that people were unfamiliar with. It's just that he was doing it really, really well with really good setups that people, that's the part that people weren't expecting. It was a really good setups. They were really good setups that people weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And so he let people pass their guard or his guard, but he had the choke in. They'd get across side and get mounted or whatever, go for arm locks, and they're tapping.
Yeah.
Because they weren't expecting it.
Yeah.
And even if those, Zach Maxwell and Clark Gracie, just phenomenal competitors, black belt jiu-jitsu, been training their whole lives.
Yeah.
Both of them got caught by that, by Majid.
Yeah. The legitimacy of like the way that whole thing went down was just so astounding. Like just like how you said, like Clark.
Yeah,
Clark has been winning stuff from day one.
And
just
same
winning,
with
and
Zach.
It's just crazy, but it just shows, where you can be that good.
Yeah.
You get just that one teeny tiny window of unfamiliarity.
Yeah, that's what it
is. That guy
is.
Creeps in there, and he's familiar, but he'll just have his way.
And then what was interesting is as people started knowing that that's what he's going to go for, but he'd still get it.
Yeah, and actually I trained with him before. Yeah. A few times or whatever, and he didn't do that to me. And I was like, hey, like what? I didn't ask him why he didn't do it to me, but I was like, do people, does everyone ask you to teach them or what? He's like, you know what? People don't. I don't even really talk about it anymore because I've become so well known for that move that it became less a part of my life. He said.
Yeah.
I was like,
well, it can happen too, where now once you go, it goes through a phase of, hey, I wasn't expecting that. And it worked because I wasn't expecting it. Then it goes like, hey, I was expecting it, but it still worked.
Yep.
But then it gets to a point where people are just going, I'm not going to do. You're like, if he grabs my collar, I need to go in a totally different direction. I need to not do anything. I need to back out, whatever. And then it becomes where, like you said, now it loses some of its effectiveness because everyone is expecting that to be the move that you do.
That's what happened with Dean, 100%.
For sure,
where they'd be like, I don't care what position I'm in. I don't care what position I have to give up. Like, just do not get into that leg lock position.
Yep.
It's and you could tell with some of his matches. I was like,
oh yeah, this guy doesn't want none.
I get it. I get it. But yeah, man, that is how it goes. But the chaos thing, I think he should compete more.
Yes, you should compete more for sure. But what I'm saying is compete in jiu-jitsu for sure, but do some smokers, do some Muay Thai, do some wrestling matches, do some Sambo, get out there, do some different competitions. And then on top of all that, man, do some scenario-based training. Do some self-defense-based training at the academy where somebody pulls out the knife, the fake knife, whatever, what do they call the fake knife? And like, let's make sure we know how to deal with that. Let's make sure we know how to deal with a baseball bat. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Because baseball bat, you know what you do with the baseball bat? Close the distance.
Yeah.
Hey, that's not even really a game changer as long as you know what you're doing. Knife, you close the distance with a knife, now you're getting stabbed. That's a problem.
Yeah.
So you got to make distance.
Yeah. And it again, man, that familiarity, like once you go through it, that's like almost night and day in and of itself. Once you've seen it. If you've never seen it versus if you've seen it once, like that first step is night and day. So that's good that he went through this. Really.
Yeah. And what's the other good psychologically, you know what he recognized psychologically? He recognized that he lost his mind, right?
Yeah.
What'd he say? He said,
elicited fear.
Yeah, I got fear. Oh, what was it? In one match, I completely lost focus and control of my mind. So that's just what you just said. When you get that, when you experience that, that's a good thing to experience because then you learn to recognize that you're losing control and you're losing your mind, and you're gonna when you realize that, it allows you to start monitoring it.
Yeah.
If you've never been, because there's people that are listening to this right now that have never lost their mind before. They've never been overwhelmed by something and just not known what to do. Never been frozen. You ever been frozen with fear? Frozen with fear. If you've never felt your fight or flight thing engaged, then when it happens, you won't know what it is.
Yeah.
You want to know what it is, so that way when it happens, you can go, oh, okay, I know what's happening right here.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make this decision.
Yeah, and how you're saying when you train boxing or boxing, and MMA. So when you get hit in the face, and we talked about this before, when you get hit in the face and you haven't really been hit in the face before, like it'll throw you off.
Oh yeah, for
just
sure.
To put really mildly, it'll throw you off. So
especially, you're right, because when you see someone get punched in the face in a movie and it seems like it doesn't really faze them that much and they keep going, if that's what you expect is going to happen when you get punched in the face, that's the wrong idea.
Yeah.
Because if you've never been punched in the face before, when you get punched, it's a little shocker.
Yeah.
And there's pain, and your eyes get blurry, and you get a little flash. I mean, there's a lot of things that go on when you get punched in the face. Once you get used to it, you're like, you can move right through it.
Exactly, yeah.
But if you're not used to it, it's a problem.
Yeah, fully. And that's another one. It's night and day when a guy has been hit in the face a bunch of times and is used to it, and a guy who's not used to it. Because you know how, like, you can hit a guy in the face or get hit in the face and they'll be like, I'm done. Like, I didn't really expect this encounter, this experience, and then other guys, they'll get hit in the face, break their nose, break their jaw, all this stuff, and they keep fighting, It's like, dang. So that night and day situation, if you're not used to it, which is essentially the same thing he went through. This guy went wild. He wasn't ready for this overwhelming experience, and he lost his mind, according to him. Yeah. So if you get hit in the face, like I remember Greg punched me in my face so hard, where I don't know if he was mad or
just Greg Train. Greg Train fires it off.
Yeah. He punched me right between the eyes. Thought he broke my face. And it was the kind where it was a timing thing too, where I came in, I was shooting in, and right before I level changed or whatever, it just connected. I was like, boom. And I remember thinking, because I just kept going, and I remember thinking, dang, I'm glad I was kind of used to getting hit in the face, because that would have kind of, at the very least, paused me for a long time. Like, dang, he would have. But when you imagine just that kind of chaos and sensation, that'll just stop you. But once you're used to it, you're good.
And this is a good point to bring up with any kind of training, like leadership training, right? When you have leaders that haven't been put in certain situations before, that's why at Echelon Front we do like role-playing exercises with people. And you put people in situations, the first time you put them in situations like dealing with a hostile subordinate that doesn't want to do the plan. The first time they get put in that scenario, they just lose, they just fall apart. Yeah. They're like, well, no, I told you to do it. And you're like, okay, let's replay that. By the third time you're doing it, they're already handling the scenario infinitely better than they did the first time. Yeah. So it's the same with everything in life. Like the exposure to it and the rehearsal of it gives you such a massive advantage that to not rehearse and to not train it's actually sad. And that's actually, the Echelon Front's a great example, because that's why we're in business. Because people don't even know that they should be doing this.
Yeah.
And to go to a company that has 50, 100, 150, 200 leaders that are leading teams, and they have no leadership training. And therefore, we're all surprised when the leader doesn't get the teams to do what they're supposed to do. Well, who taught them how to lead? You just don't show up to work knowing how to lead. No, you actually get trained to lead.
Yeah. All these unfamiliar micro scenarios happening. And,
Yeah,
you know.
that's one of the cool. Like at the muster, we do these little drills at the muster, and you could see people are overwhelmed with the knowledge that they gain from 2 or 3 little scenarios that we put in front of them. And these are common scenarios that happen all the time. But when you watch seasoned business leaders try and handle a scenario that they haven't seen before, now they might have seen it before, but they never actually had to deal with it. The first time they try and deal with it, they fall apart.
Yeah.
And it's real. I would say it takes like 10 seconds before you go, okay, let's just stop because you've already got this guy mad at you. Well, let's try this again. Because we haven't been through this situation before. They've never been punched in the face before.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Don't let it happen.
Get punched in the face a few times in practice. You can do this. It's kind of like, I remember when we were kids, there's this gum, like Wrigley's chewing gum.
Yeah.
You know the little packs. There's like 4 or 5 of them in there. It's a small little thing.
Yep.
And you grab one, and there's one kind of sticking out. You can say, hey, do you want one?
Yep.
Offer one to your friends. So it was my brother. And he did, long story, but he was crying from something else. So he was sad. And he was like crying. And, oh, by the way, he offers me some gum. I grab the gum. It's one of those mouse traps.
Yeah.
And it slaps you and it kind of hurts when you're a little kid anyway. And it snaps my finger. I'm like, dang, I never, I see he's laughing. He was crying for something else, and then he's laughing, cheered him up, whatever.
Double leg.
It was at the airport. Well, actually, which would have made the double leg even better. Nonetheless, I'd never seen that before. Now, someone offers me Wrigley's gum. I'm aware. I'm ready for that mousetrap. Maybe the mousetrap, maybe not.
But you're grabbing by the side.
I'm grabbing by the side. Exactly right.
Lesson learned.
Yeah, exactly right. I don't have to endure that. I won't lose my mind. Life is no different.